Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Ideas xLab's Uncovering Connection and Inclusion video podcast. We are powered by Switcher Studio and supported by Main & Clay. I'm Josh Miller, the co-founder and CEO, and each week we are engaging a dynamic group of leaders in conversations that are grounded in curiosity and courage as we think about what inclusion, connection, and aligning our vision and values in ever-changing time looks like, and how we use all of those stories and better understanding each other as how we build the path forward. So I am super excited to introduce today's guest, Jean Dolan from Nike. Jean has been part of my life for a number of years. We first met at Bellarmine University. She was my accounting tutor. She has one of the most bright and cheery personalities and outgoing personalities for an accounting major, and it was something that was really helpful for me in making it through that, and also really expanded my thinking about how I could leverage accounting. And so I'm super excited that we've stayed connected, we're still able to work together, and that she is willing to come on today to talk about some of these different concepts, covering what showing up authentically looks like and what her experience has been over the past few weeks with COVID-19. So Jean, thank you so much for joining me. And we are going to get you up on the screen. How are you today?
Hi, Josh. Thanks so much for that intro. It's so great to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I have so enjoyed the different ways that our worlds have continued to intersect over the past few years, even though you are no longer in Louisville, since you are now in Portland, Oregon. And I'm just really glad and thankful that you were willing to make some time to join me for this discussion today.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dive right in because we have a lot of ground to cover, along with some exciting news of what happened over the past few weeks for you. And so we're going to start where we do every week, which is thinking about Jean as an individual and as a member of the community, and what is it that gives you oxygen in your life and work? So that's where I'd love to start today.
Sure. So what gives me oxygen? So I think for me, progress or working towards betterment is something that I really find joy and get energy from. So that definition of betterment and kind of working towards certain goals or a certain way of learning and evolving has definitely shifted and meant different things in different phases of my life. But as I kind of reflect back onto what's been consistent throughout my life, my career, it's been really enjoying that kind of process of looking for ways to improve and be better, right? So I think about like in work, that can kind of be equivalent to problem solving. So in the world of accounting and finance, like finding that kind of joy of, hey, how can I do these things differently? How can I help someone that may not understand? Like even back when I was kind of tutoring with you, I really enjoyed that process of having to kind of figure out how to teach and be creative on how we talked about a maybe dry subject to make it exciting. So that's really where I get my oxygen, is just continually progressing and working towards betterment.
Yeah, I totally see that as I think back to, the process of how, it was the JJJ accounting time with Jamie, Jean, and Josh, but how you approach that, and also the social facet. I really think that you seem to, from an outside perspective, thrive on being able to engage with people and kind of ask questions and seek understanding, and it all ties back into how you approach life as a process.
No, totally. And it's funny that you say that too, because I was talking this week, kind of preparing and thinking about this question with my partner, and he was like, hey, you just like sharing knowledge and you like sharing your energy with people. And so it's kind of, I think that's really a testament to like, I really enjoy just learning and figuring out like, hey, how can we learn and how can we kind of get better together, and sharing when I kind of learn myself with others. Yeah. And it just really, it's a genuine, it lights me up. So I think that energy is felt because I truly enjoy it.
Well,
no matter the topic.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we got to experience that in a different setting recently when you and Ross participated in Ideas xLab Showing Up 100 virtual workshop, which bridges us into our next topic of covering. And so Deloitte has a great report that we reference every week, Uncovering Talent, and thinking about covering or the downplaying or hiding of a facet ourselves at life and in work, and what is the impact of that, and how do we think, critically think about our lives and where that's present, but also how do we actively think about uncovering. And so that's where I'd love to take our conversation next is, as you've reflected over the past few years, you've been in the corporate environment, you're testing out different things. How have you seen covering within your life and then started to actively think about what uncovering looks like so that you can show up authentically? So Jean, technology is great when it's our friend. And we had some kind of Wi-Fi disconnect. So I'd love, if you don't mind, if you could restart your answer about covering and what uncovering looks like for you.
No, totally. And I feel like that little hiccup is kind of perfect segue into this answer as well. So when I think about covering, and I think about specifically for me, the last couple years, getting back to knowing that I get energy off of progress and finding ways to be better and learn and change, that can also kind of be taken to an extreme, or more of I think of myself as kind of a recovering perfectionist, just from the sense of, hey, like, how can we make this perfect? And you can become really internally critical and looking at what's wrong with everything instead of seeing the beauty and also seeing potential. So a couple of years ago, I went to a yoga class, and I had tried yoga a few times, or a lot of times in the past, and it really was something that was really difficult for me, just having to sit still and not feeling like I was kind of in constant motion.
All right, so we are back again. We dropped off as Jean was starting to talk about one of your experiences during a yoga class. So Jean, if we could pick it up there, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, so just talking about how I had this kind of moment of that kind of challenged my belief system, right? So the teacher was saying, hey, how do you talk to yourself? What messages are you giving yourself? And for me at the time, it was a lot of self-criticism, working towards that progression, but more towards this perfectionistic, overly critical kind of mindset. And in the class, after I had that, okay, I'm being self-critical, he said, however you talk and treat yourself is the only way that you can treat other people. Right. So what you're practicing every day, and that language that you're using towards yourself is what you're reflecting out onto the world. So that kind of hit me, because I didn't want to be mean to others. Right. And I thought that I could treat myself one way and treat others a different way. So after that class, I was really kind of hooked, like, hey, I don't want to be a source of criticism and negativity. So I continued going to class and actually completed a teacher training at that studio. Okay. And the teacher training was really a really cool experience. And I'll just tell a quick story just from the first, one of the first classes sessions that we had. So I had done yoga maybe a year, maybe not gone very much. So I didn't have a lot of experience, and we had to kind of test out practicing in small groups, a really simple flow, like 4 moves. And I know I went up there and I mixed up down dog with child's pose, like something really, really basic. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, we're going to get this feedback from our classmates and teachers, expecting like, okay, I know what they're going to say. I mixed this up, and I already had the list of everything I had to improve about what I had just done. And simply the feedback, my teacher looks at me and she just said, you have such a joyful voice. And what was so shocking, and it actually gives me the chills just talking about it, it was so shocking because it was so evident how often in our society and culture we are focusing on what's wrong with the situation and forgetting to call out each other and notice in ourselves what makes us truly unique
Yeah.
And even in that moment, I had a flashback to, in middle school when that was the feedback I used to get in school, like, Jean talks a lot, but she just brings such good energy. And it was this moment I had forgotten about that. So that's how I kind of am transitioning that into your question about covering. I think through that small moment and then the process of kind of digging into, hey, what else am I not paying attention to? And how is my focus on like criticism covering up how I truly want to express myself and also accepting whatever that looks like, right? Because I think that you can continue, at least personally, I can continue to look for betterment and try new processes and evolve as a person while still trying to accept the state that I'm in and other people are in as well. So that story really stands out to me, and I think it's a continuous process. I'm never going to master it, right? So.
Yeah, it makes me think about, and I am totally in the boat with you in terms of like trying to unpack and think about how to move from a perfectionist mindset to what it sounds like you're describing, a process-based mindset, which gets back to that curiosity and wanting to learn and all of those things. But how are you, perfectionism manifests in so many different ways. How are you like actively practicing that shift?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that, so one thing that comes to mind and something that brings me a lot of energy is movement. So I think through my journey of like just exercising, I think my dad is the same way. So I think it's genetic, but I love endorphin rush. I love working out. I think part of it too is there's always a sense of evolution and progress.
We were experiencing some technical difficulties in our Uncovering Connection and Inclusion video podcast, so we have migrated to Instagram Live to keep the conversation with Jean Dolan going. We are going to add her in just a minute, so I'm going to see if she has been able to join us yet. But there she is.
All right, hi,
hello, hello.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Even, different platform, but thank you for being flexible and being willing to move our conversation so we could still keep it going. I'm super excited. I'd like for us to backtrack just for a second for those who are just joining us. So this is for the Uncovering Connection and Inclusion video podcast. One of the topics that Jean Dolan from Nike and I are talking about is the concept of covering. So the downplaying or hiding of facets of ourselves while we're at work and in life. And Jean was just talking about some of the instances where she identified covering within her life and was sharing a story about how she was working through some perfectionist tendencies and the role of yoga within that journey. And Jean, you were about to share, if you'd like to kind of recap a little bit of that, you're welcome to, but you were about to share a story when we were in LinkedIn Live about an experience with your dad, I believe.
I think it was just about movement, but
okay.
It's all good. So I think just to kind of recap what we've been talking about, so understanding myself and knowing that what gives me energy and oxygen is kind of progressing and working towards betterment, and how that can be super rewarding and a positive experience continuing to learn and find ways to be better. It can also shift into this perfectionistic, self-critical, and critical of others, frankly, kind of mindset.
Absolutely.
So I think for me, my journey through becoming a yoga teacher and kind of learning about living in a world and questioning kind of my beliefs that I had to be perfect and there's always room for improvement, and kind of sitting with acceptance of how things are, and finding appreciation for like the current state of things, including whatever quote unquote flaws might be part of that. And I think one of the questions that you asked is just how I continue to practice fighting, I guess, that sense of perfectionism or checking myself. And I think for me, movement has always been something that I really enjoy. Like I ran in high school and college, I danced when I was little. So kind of channeling that love of movement and finding ways to continue to use movement to find a healthier connection to my body and my physical self. Because I think that a lot of times my previous relationships with movement were, again, back to that perfectionistic, hey, I have to run faster. Maybe I was working out for reasons to look a certain way. And so now really doing something that I love and trying to be present with and notice how I'm reacting as I'm moving. So that's one thing that I enjoy, and I can kind of get into my routine and constantly be practicing that acceptance.
I so relate to that. When we, like, especially as COVID-19 was happening and like gyms were closing and, you know, there were cities and other places that like foundationally shut down. Like you didn't leave your house for a few weeks. And mentally I went through this whole process of like, oh my God. So I need to run like a bajillion miles now to save it up almost. Like you can do that, which, you know, that's another story. But it's the past 10 weeks has really made me reconceptualize what am I being physically active for? And what are the self-imposed limitations or those inner narratives that I may have around like what my body's supposed to look like. So I avoided doing push-ups for years because it builds my chest out, and there's all of these different ways of understanding things. Has that, as you think about being in motion and yoga, how has that supported you in kind of being healthier and staying sane over the past 10 weeks with COVID-19?
I mean, I think that going through that teacher training, and also after going through the training, I was teaching a class every week. So again, going back to that, hey, I love working towards betterment, and I get such energy from sharing what I learned with others. Kind of teaching classes in a way that also just re-emphasizes like, hey, however you're doing the move, it's right. Like if you can't touch your toes, like what are you feeling? Just notice that. So I think continuing to have that practice of reiterating to others, like, hey, I want the people in my class to feel like this practice is approachable and that they're doing it right and they can't mess it up. I think that's helped me practice that self-talk with myself as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really grateful for just having gone through that before this experience so that I can continue to notice when I'm getting hyper, like, again, noticing the motives and getting hyper focused on like one goal. I think another thing that's been kind of going back to the uncovering with this is realizing that I really enjoy progress and betterment and movement, and I've found this joy from that, but that's not everybody's truth. I think that was kind of something that I've also goes along with, like, hey, I'm going to share this with these people, and then they're going to be better too. And living with somebody in the same house who took a very different approach the first few weeks. Like I was doing every workout class, and I was having fun too, getting to join my friends around the country, in Louisville included, that were teaching. I was like, I get to go to their class, and I would kind of overdo it. I was doing a lot of workouts, and that kind of gave me a sense of peace, and I enjoyed it. But knowing that my partner kind of maybe taking a more lounge-heavy approach was his way, and I needed to respect that as well. So I think that kind of goes along with, hey, when I realized that I'm just being my true self, and I don't want to make anybody else feel like they can't also express themselves how they need to.
It's been so interesting to witness how everyone has kind of coped and moved through the past 10 weeks and this experience differently, and finding, you know, how do you support the person that you may be around 24/7 while also respecting the needs that you have. And I really enjoyed getting to participate with you all in our Showing Up 100 activity, and part of that activity was around some of those foundational values and those facets of ourselves, and showing up. What does showing up authentically mean? Could you talk a little bit just about that activity, and if there were learnings that came out of that that supported not only you as an individual, but kind of the household?
Yeah, totally. I think so. We did that activity with you a week or two in, and I think it was great timing because the way that you set up the activity and framed it and got us both in the mindset, and then being able to see the self portrait that we both put together. I learned a lot about my partner through that, and also I think it made the connection between what I valued and also helped me learn what he values as well. So I think kind of focus on I would find myself wanting to say something or interject my opinion. It's like, wait a second, like he's going on his own kind of path, and I need to respect that. And I think that activity gave like a safe and a unique way of presenting that, because I think sometimes asking somebody, hey, what do you value, and asking just the questions on their own can be a little intimidating and hard to find the answers to. So the way that you were able to like add this sense of like art and creativity and storytelling, I think it helped us communicate with each other, frankly. So
it was, I really valued, as a friend being able to experience it with you, but also seeing how as a couple you all doing it together, how that kind of lifted up different things that you were learning about each other throughout the process. I thought that was really, it hadn't been done in that same way before. So that was a neat application to see.
Yeah, and I think knowing that there's recognizing too, even if you know somebody really well and you live with them, there's certain judgments that, at least personally, I found myself, or assumptions made based on different labels or groups that he was in, right? And I think that was a kind of moment, a humbling moment for me too, to be like, wait, I need to check myself, because I cannot know anyone's experience just by looking at the outside.
So true. And that's one of the things, and I can't pull the photos up in Instagram Live, but you all have found a great way of supporting and celebrating different facets of each other in terms of what you wear, the activities you all do. Could you talk a little bit more about that and describe, I think it was New Year's Eve, if I'm not mistaken, describe what that photo looked like for people who aren't able to see it.
Yeah, totally. So, so he likes to experiment with different ways of dressing and expressing himself through fashion. And that's something that we talked about kind of in our session. As a woman and growing up the way that I did, there was a lot of hesitation on how I presented myself, right? And not wanting to look like I was trying too hard or want people to judge me for like what I was wearing. So I kept it pretty kind of blended in with the crowd in a lot of ways. And the picture that you're talking about, for Ross's 30th birthday, we went to Iceland. And I remember we were getting ready for going to Iceland on this big trip. It was right before New Year's. And he's like, Jean, we're going to get some furs when we're there, right? So and I was like, what? Furs? So we got these secondhand furs. And so for New Year's, we went out. He had this like fox cape on. I had this, wolf big coat and sequins, and just before, I think, over the top, but he gives space for me to have fun with what we're wearing, and know too that when you kind of put on different outfits or project a different vibe, it can help you learn more about yourself, right? And I think that before, I kind of viewed it as, I don't want to put like a lot of makeup on or wear something really flashy, because I associated that more with trying to conform. So my kind of rejection of that idea was, I'm going to not put a lot of effort in. And so it's been really fun just getting to experiment and like kind of dress in different ways and have fun with it, and also support him with that. Like, because kind of do that together.
Yeah, I think last time I talked to Ross, I was like, you better watch out because I'm coming for that cake.
Well, he's also very generous and goes through different, he's ever changing, so you never know.
Yeah. So before we talk about the exciting news from the past week, that's on the personal front, I want to hear a little bit more about how COVID-19 has impacted you and your work. So you have been out in Portland, Oregon with Nike. You've done different roles within the organization. Could you just talk a little bit about how that's evolved, especially with COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think that my experience at Nike, I mean, it's a big corporation. There's lots of really high achieving people, and Nike definitely has a certain high standard and persona. And through this working from home, I think it's really brought out a different side of people. There's been moments at all levels of the company where there might be a tech issue or people are even opening up about, hey, this is really hard for me. How are you all doing? Or having kids running in and out of big meetings and people just accepting and being patient with one another. And I think that's one of like the silver linings is just from my personal view, seeing that shift and kind of to a lot of the focus of uncovering is when other people are vulnerable, it gives the space for that to happen more across the company. So I think that's just been something that I'm really happy about or thankful for in this time that there is this heightened sense of compassion and understanding.
Yeah, I think that has been one of the things for so many of us. I know that within our team and even just like within our household, that's something like we're all trying to navigate this together. And you have to, I compared it we sent a newsletter out this morning and I compared it to like the shadow of a sundial because you have a general idea, like there's a general structure of what time it is, but there's a little bit of buffer around the edges in terms of a few minutes, but also kind of grace for people. You may have to log in too early. We had to move from LinkedIn Live to Instagram Live. So there's all these different facets, and if you're willing to adapt and then be vulnerable when things aren't going well or you need support in a different way, it makes such a big difference. So Jean, your sound cut out for just a second, but where I'd love to go, there you are, you're back. Where I'd love to go next is talking about what you all celebrated this past week and how you all did that within the parameters of COVID-19 as our reality right now.
Yeah, so my partner and I decided to get married on Monday. So we got married on Memorial Day. And it was really, we decided the week before, so it was kind of, we had been engaged for 3 months, but we decided on the date the week before. And having to coordinate a wedding and doing so in our own backyard we're kind of on our own in our own little bubble. So it was actually really fun and it kind of challenged us to make it our own. Right, so even though we were on our own, and it was like, hey, we'll just do a small little ceremony in our backyard. I noticed myself probably more strongly all of the different pressures I still felt to make it look a certain way or to include certain people. And so Ross with his style, like he was like, hey, I want to wear a cowboy hat, and we pulled in, I think, because of the short time and also the accessibility of like going to different stores, and we used pieces that were in our house and that friends and family had given us. So he wore one of my grandfather's bolo ties. I wore one of my grandmother's brooches in my hair. We used, stood on a blanket that I had gotten with a really close friend. So I think because we were kind of forced to work within what we already had, it really was more us. And we were like, hey, we are just going to make this work. And it ended up reflecting a truer sense of who we are as a couple and our past, our relatives, and our experiences together and apart. So it really was a fun experience. And again, constantly challenging, like, hey, how do you want to show up and what makes you feel the most authentically yourself?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, and that really comes through in the photo. I really loved the one you texted me when you were telling me that you all had gotten married, where y'all are kind of blurry, but you've got the cake, like you can kind of see the setting, and it really embodied when I think about you all and like how you all step into the world together. I think that like it says Jean and Ross all over it, and I love that. I think sometimes having to work within confines actually lets you, be creative in an even more authentic way, just because you have to work with what you have. And so I love to see that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like thinking about tools and how not only with like wedding planning, but at work and just making decisions day in and day out. I think that one of the biggest tools or learnings I've had recently is just to listen to how you physically react, right? So when I was starting to talk and feeling myself getting into, this isn't me, I would kind of tense up in my shoulders and like just really tuning into what your body is telling you as you're feeling pressure or making decisions in life.
We're going tomorrow, actually, we're going to visit our wedding venue for the first time, like as a site visit officially. We've been there before, but it's been very interesting. Ours will be a more like formalized thing in the future. And even as I think about all of the different layers, there are moments where I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But the process
keep checking in.
The process of the planning and that check-in, like you're describing, is so important. So I wonder, as whether it's personal, whether it's work-related, are there lessons or practices that you have picked up recently that you think other people would benefit from maybe hearing or maybe adapting for their own use?
Yeah, no, I think that tuning in with the physical reactions for me has been something that I think in the past I kind of pushed aside, right? I mean, one of the most obvious examples is running and being injured and just running through the pain and getting the feedback that is strength. I think culturally kind of blocking out feelings and working through things can get a lot of positive feedback, whether that be running or working tons of hours and putting, just all of your effort into like staying late and showing up a certain way at work. I think looking back to those times when I was unhealthily swimming one way, I was having physical ailments as well. And so it doesn't have to be an injury that's like you're getting to an extreme point, but even, hey, do you want to eat this for dinner? I mean, how is your body reacting? Are you feeling resistance? Your body will tell you, and everybody's different. It might be, shoulder tension or, whatever that is for you, but just taking a moment and seeing if you can notice a difference. And career-wise, I really found that tool to be really useful when changing jobs, because I think that's a space where, for me personally, being in, like, having a CPA behind my name, and there's a lot of judgments and, like, oh, this is the correct, quote-unquote, career path for you. Like, when choosing which job to go into, making sure that I'm feeling good about it and not resisting in my body has been really critical for me.
Yes. Well said. You talked about a few different things that I totally relate to. The glorification of like being busy or always working or feeling the pressure to always work. It's definitely something that even as we're redefining what it means to be productive. So productive, does that mean that you work 40 hours, or productive, that means you know what tasks you need to accomplish them and you get it done. And then if there's time left over, you can go do something else. Right. And so that's something I've definitely had to think through And I love what you were saying about how you listen to your body. My therapist is doing teletherapy, which has been awesome during this time. But what we were talking about last week was when I hurt my toe banged it on the kitchen oven during a workout, and I took a few weeks off from it. And she was saying, one way that you can think about your body is as a team member. So if, like maybe your toe is a member of the team, or your leg, whatever's hurt, or just the different facets, like, would you treat your team that way? These real people, you should be respecting your body that way too. And that was a helpful reframe for me to think about, like, oh, I would be encouraging my team member not to be walking on their foot, but now I'm sitting here trying to go out and run. And so all of those different little reframes, I think, are helpful.
And that can be, I mean, a very complicated thing. Everyone's relationship with their body is so unique and different. So just during that, if you're kind of tuning in, just being patient with yourself too, if you're going through that process, I guess. But I love that reframe. It's awesome.
So we are getting close to the end of our time together for today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about across any of the realms that we plan to discuss that you'd like to talk about, or that have come to mind for you that you want to bring up that may have been separate from our initial topics?
I think that we covered everything. So I'm covering, that I kind of had in mind. I just think reiterating that for me, recognizing that it's a process and we're constantly evolving, and just to continue to question where thoughts are coming from, right? And where the beliefs are coming from. And not, if you're noticing resisting, kind of just noticing that, right? And not kind of beating yourself up as you're figuring things out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thank you for being willing to join me today, for being adaptive and jumping from LinkedIn Live to IG Live as we address technical issues, and for being willing to talk about some of those personal and vulnerable areas and the ways that you're growing and evolving as a human being and as a friend, and now a wife and partner. So thank you.
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's always wonderful talking with you, and I love all of the work that you're doing. So I appreciate it.
And if people want to engage with you, is the best way to go see some of the photos that we talked about, to go to your Instagram page?
Yeah, Instagram would be the best way, for sure. Feel free to share photos if you want on Ideas xLab as well.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Jean. I will touch base with you soon, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Sounds good. Bye, Josh.
Bye. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for being flexible with us as we moved over to Instagram Live, for tuning in for my conversation with Jean Dolan from Nike. We will work to get a combination video of our partial discussion from LinkedIn and from IG Live put together so that you all can see the full discussion, including our exploration of the different facets of covering, so this downplaying or hiding of parts of ourselves while we are at work and in life. You can go and see our past discussions from our video podcast series at ideasxlab.com/uncovering. If you have a recommendation for someone you think would be interesting to talk to, or if you're interested in coming on the video podcast, shoot me a message, let me know. We are going to continue having these courageous and curious conversations as we move towards and look at the future, and how do we think about approaching it from an inclusion and connection standpoint. So thank you all again. Looking forward to talking to you soon, and have a great Thursday.